Okay guys, it's the next day obviously. I've changed clothes. I slept here last night. I kind of just went off into the storage room, set up a cot, slept here tonight. It just wasn't worth traveling all the way back last night. I worked today, getting ready to get off of work, and now I am loading up the Zizzo and getting ready to hit the road. I've got my new tent on the back of my back. I usually have a lot of big packages sent here, but I got this new tent from Nightcat. It's a quick pop-up tent. So we're gonna see how this thing works out tonight. Yesterday, I kind of told you guys not to worry about me, but I wanted to finish up the conversation with telling you some of the experiences I've had with some of the suggestions that you guys have made, such as roommate, such as room to rent, such as cheap efficiency apartment in the bad area of town or whatever. I want to talk a little bit about those ideas when I'm heading back over to Indiana. It is dropped down in temperature. I'm gonna have to put on a jacket, guys. It's cold. Now I'm getting hot. Put on my jacket because it's cold. And of course the sun comes out and now I'm burning up a little bit, or at least I feel hot. The sun is starting to come out. How lovely. How very lovely. Hey, fellas. Okay, guys. I wanted to talk a little bit about the suggestions I've been getting. First off, we're going to discuss roommates. The big R word. I've had plenty of experiences with roommates throughout my whole life, especially in my younger years. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I had a lot of experiences with bad roommates. It's not necessarily that the people that I was roommates with were bad people, so to speak, but you know, young 20-somethings are always flaky. They tend to move out when they don't have any money and leave you with the rent. That's happened several times. A lot of times people get together because they can't afford an apartment on their own, so they find somebody that's willing to room with them. The problem is you guys might not be that compatible. One person might have habits the other person just can't stand, you know, a deal breaker type of situation. And that's pretty much what happened to me throughout the whole history of my 20s. Then I got married and I was with my wife, or I lived with my wife for a long time. Unfortunately, we'll talk about my marriage in another video because that's a whole separate video topic on itself. In fact, that's a whole series of video topics that I can go over. My marriage wasn't good. I think we got married way too soon. That's the short of it. We got married without knowing each other. That's the biggest problem. And that's very similar to jumping in and being a roommate with somebody that you don't really know. You guys might not get along. You get together because of financial things. You get together for mutual benefit, and then you realize you don't even really like each other. That's very similar to the roommate situation. Might get loud, guys. I apologize for the road noise. After I separated with my wife, it was a completely different situation. When I separated from my wife, I moved out to Colorado because I took a job. I took a job that I really wanted to do. I moved out to Colorado. And when I moved out to Colorado, let's just face it, I didn't realize how expensive it was going to be out there. And I started looking for cheap one-bedroom apartments. And at the time I first moved out to Colorado, I could not find anything. Not anything at the price range I wanted to pay. So I did the roommate thing for the first 2 years I was in Colorado. It was horrible. It was really horrible. I did not have fun with that at all. The first person I called was a nice old Mexican lady that was renting out a room in her basement. She had 2 other rooms down there in addition to the one she wanted to rent me. And she had other tenants down there. Now it was kind of like 3 rooms and a common area and then a bathroom. And the common area was shared by all the tenants that lived down in that basement. Now I was there a week and I didn't like it at all. I didn't like it. I'm an introvert, a massive introvert. I don't like living with people I don't know or I'm not really comfortable with. That's just me, that's how I am. I tried to kind of overlook it and just try to get over my awkwardness when it came to moving in with people. It wasn't that I had a problem with, okay? Because a lot of times I would probably just lock myself in my room and stay in there anyways. The thing I had a problem with was the fact that those guys, those Mexican guys that were down there, did drugs. One of the guys had tattoos all over his face and teardrop tattoos, you know. He looked like a gang member or something. I don't know if he was or not. They seemed all right with me. Nobody really messes with me too much. But it was the drugs that I couldn't take. I don't want to be around that. I don't take drugs and I don't want to take drugs. I don't want to be around it either. It's just not something I want to deal with. I was at that place for a total of 2 weeks. I'm trying to go slow enough where the wind noise won't be so bad, but between the cars and the wind, I don't know how well you guys can hear me, but I'll continue on talking as if you can. But anyway, guys, I was there for a total of 2 weeks. I actually only stayed there for a week, and then I got sent up to training through my company, and I was gone for a week. I went up to Chicago, and I didn't stay in that place. As soon as I got back, I found another place, another roommate. The second roommate, oh my goodness, the second roommate was just as bad, but in a different way. There was a woman that was online looking for a roommate. She was my age, in her 40s. I thought it would be a good fit because people that are older are generally more stable. They're generally not as irresponsible. I probably wouldn't have to worry about coming home to partying and drug use or any of that stuff. So I figured it would probably be a better fit. Oh, crap. Ugh. Remember when I said I was an introvert? Well, I don't like being uncomfortable. And of course, I'm going to be uncomfortable around people I don't know or people I'm not 100% used to. She always walked around in just her regular sleeping clothes a lot of times. She would come out and she would just be wearing these tiny little shorts with barely a tank top on, you know, because she wanted to feel comfortable in her own apartment or whatever. But it's like, you got some strange guy living with you. Why are you dressed like that? And I know what a lot of you guys are going to say. I wasn't attracted to her, so I don't, you know, and even if I were, I still wouldn't do that because, like I said, I'm just not that kind of person. I've got to know somebody really well and be in a long-term relationship before I'll even consider something like that. But regardless, it was just very uncomfortable the way she walked around and the way she carried herself. And she did have a boyfriend, or I should say a male gentleman caller, or whatever you want to call it when you get over 30 years old. Anyway, she had a boyfriend, and this guy would spend the night quite often. The problem isn't that he was staying over. The problem was that she didn't want him sleeping in the same room as her because he snored really loud. So she would kick him out and make him sleep in the living room. Well, he couldn't sleep on the couch because of how uncomfortable it was. So he ended up getting a cot and he would sleep in the middle of the living room. It was really annoying because I would come home from work and there'd be a guy sleeping in the middle of the living room. If I wasn't uncomfortable before, I'm definitely uncomfortable now. And I was uncomfortable before, just so you know. She also was pretty messy for the most part. You go into her bathroom, which is the shared bathroom, and there would be like used feminine products in a, you know, like one of those trash cans that sit beside the toilet that people throw stuff in. She'd have it overflowing with used feminine products. Tampons, bloody. It was just so gross and so uncomfortable. And then on top of that, she would like take her cat food, because she had 2 cats, right? And she would take her cat food and just sprinkle it all over the kitchen floor. Just all over the kitchen floor. I didn't even know this. I went in to get a glass of water out of the sink and I step on a bunch of cat food. And I'm thinking the cats like spread it out all over the place. No, it was her. She said, my cats won't eat out of a regular bowl. They'll only eat if I spread it out so that they can graze. So I'm just getting kind of irritated at this point, right? I overlooked it. I'm just like, I'll just stay in my room. I'll just get bottled water. I'll just, you know, whatever I have to do, just so I can stay away from that situation, right? The straw that broke the camel's back with this one too was drug use too. I didn't know that she did drugs. I would have assumed that she didn't, but she was a major pothead. And I guess when she started getting more and more comfortable with me being there, she just started doing drugs. So I'd walk in to puffs of smoke. I mean, I don't know if she hotboxed the whole apartment or what, but she smoked a lot. I guess she was like smoking outside or someplace where it wouldn't fill up the house or the apartment, I should say. So I didn't notice it before. But yeah, when she was smoking it in the apartment, I started having a problem because I'm breathing that crap in because I can smell it all the way in my room. And I'm worried because I don't know how that works, you know? Will breathing in a bunch of pot smoke cause you to test positive for inhaling pot? I don't know. I don't know how that works. I was worried about it nonetheless because if they randomly drug tested me at my job, I could lose my job. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back with her. And I ended up getting an apartment with a young guy. But the only problem with him is he lived way outside of Denver, like 25 miles outside of Denver. He's a 25-year-old guy. He needed roommates. He got me and another guy named Jason to rent rooms in his house. So this is where the rooms to rent come into place. Because rooms to rent and roommates are generally the same thing. You're basically roommates. There's no separation there. You're a roommate whether you like it or not. Because generally you're not just renting the room, you're renting access to the kitchen and the living room and the bathroom and all that stuff. So anyway, this house was not nice. It was okay, but it was an older house. And this guy bought it for $325,000, which at that time it was cheap for Colorado, but it's still way outside of Denver. But even though it was an older house, it was still nicer than the vast majority of apartments I had lived in at that time. All right, here comes the dangerous part. Hopefully I don't die. And hopefully I don't die on camera. The problem with this guy is that he was extremely difficult to live with. He complained about everything. The other roommate, Jason, that he rented out another room to, that guy had it way before I did. He was out of there. You see, this guy wanted to complain about everything. If his electrical bill went up $10, he would complain about it. He would complain about just how much every utility was costing. And he would blame it on us, as if we were costing him extra money. And that he kept talking about raising the rent and all this other stuff. It was just getting so annoying. Jason would have his girlfriend over sometimes, and of course they would utilize the kitchen and maybe cook some dinner. And of course, he would get upset about that. He got upset all the time. And he talked about charging him extra rent or charging more money because she was around. Even though she didn't really come over all that often, just every once in a while. We were already paying him enough money. You could go into the downtown Denver area and rent a room for just as much money as he was charging us, and we would be right there in the heart of everything. We wouldn't be so far out. So him threatening to raise our rent or charge us for electricity and all that stuff, it just got annoying really, really quickly. Especially considering the fact that he was such a hypocrite about it. He would get mad about his electricity bill, but I don't know how many times I came home late at night from work because I did the second shift at that time, and I'd come home from work, and of course, every light in that house would be on. He would be passed out in the freaking living room watching TV. TV would be blaring. The door would be wide open where anybody can just wander on in there. We knew why his electric bill was high, but he didn't ever blame himself, see? He blamed everybody else. It was everybody else's fault, not his. So I was there for about a year, and I'd had it. I would say first 2.5 years dealing with roommates, you know what I mean? Now I know what a lot of you are gonna say. There are good roommates out there, guys, and I understand that, okay? But I don't have years and years to search around and find a decent roommate. But basically, guys, I'm gonna tell you like this, because this is generally what I've noticed in my many years on this planet dealing with roommates. Generally, the people that put ads out for rooms to rent or roommates are generally not the most friendly people, or maybe I should say not the easiest people to live with. They're generally the most difficult people to live with. Jeez, I can't deal with it. I can't deal with it anymore. I just can't. I want to live a relatively stress-free life. I want to live a drama-free life. I don't want to hear arguing. I don't want to hear fighting. I don't want to hear accusations. I just don't want to deal with that. And the older I've gotten, the more I do not want to deal with drama. I just don't want to deal with it. Yeah, in my past, I've dealt with roommates, and rooms to rent is the same thing, like I said earlier. And I just don't want to deal with it. It's just not worth it. Mostly difficult people and hard to deal with situations. Now let's talk about cheap efficiency apartments, or even studio apartments. Studio apartments can be expensive depending on what area of town they are. But mainly people that want to save a lot of money will go and rent in the not so nice area of town because it's cheap. And why wouldn't you want to go and get cheap rent? I'm all for cheap rent. When I moved out to Colorado, the whole idea was that I had cheap rent. I wanted to keep my costs down there. And of course, everything just kept going up and up and up and up. But regardless, I wanted to keep my costs down as little as possible. That way I had plenty of money left over to go on bicycle trips. And obviously I was sending money home to my family, but I wanted to be able to go take a couple decent trips a year and take a lot of small, you know, weekend excursions. So yeah, I wanted to keep my costs down as low as I possibly could. As soon as I moved out of that one dude's house, I went and I got a place in downtown Denver that was kind of like an old halfway house. It basically was like a room to rent, except it was a building that was designed, it almost kind of looked like an old hotel or an old halfway house. You had a bunch of rooms that were a little bit bigger than the average, you know. Mine was actually not bad because it had kind of like a small little nook in it where I put like a microwave and a portable fridge. So it was kind of like a mini apartment. The only problem is these places didn't have any bathrooms. So each floor would have 2 bathrooms, and there was 4 floors. So each floor had a couple of bathrooms, so you had to share bathrooms and showers, and you had to share a big common area. And the big common area was for everybody in the building. It was kind of like a big living room slash kitchen where you can cook food or sit down and watch the main TV that was in there. But there wasn't a TV when I was there. Apparently it got stolen and they never replaced it. But there was a big long table, and you could sit at the table, and a lot of the people from the building would sit and play poker, play card games or whatever. Now, I didn't give a crap about the common areas. As I said before, I'm an introvert. I'm not gonna go out there and hang out with a bunch of people I don't know. But the problem with this building is, and a lot of the cheaper buildings for that matter, is they tend to attract a lower element of society, if I should say. And I'm not talking about poor people. Poor people are fine as long as they're decent people. I'm talking about the degenerates of society. You know, drug users, prostitutes, people with massive criminal histories that keep on reoffending. You know, a lot of times they can't afford much and they have to rent in places like that. And oh man, it just makes it that much worse. You were always constantly worrying about if somebody broke into your area. And so what I did was I rented a storage unit to keep my belongings, like my bikes and a few other things I didn't want to get stolen. But it was horrible, guys. There was all manner of drug use, prostitution, just all kinds of stuff. The drug use was the main thing. I'd walk into the common area sometimes because you kind of had to go through there to get to the main entrance. Normally I went out the back, but sometimes I had to go out the main entrance depending on if they were doing stuff in the alleyway or whatever. But I'd walk through there, and of course there would be some people doing drugs. There would be people doing all manner of stuff that I was just not comfortable with being around. As I said earlier, people played poker there. One day I came in and there was about 5 guys, 3 older, 2 younger, and there was a woman, and she was sitting at the poker table with cards in front of her. All of them had cards in front of them, and she was completely butt naked. So I was like, what the heck is going on? I found out later that they were playing strip poker. I guess she was losing. Needless to say, there'd be all manner of stuff like that. I don't know how many times I'd come home and there'd be a drug addict or a prostitute in the hallway. There was one prostitute sitting in the common area, and when I came in through the main entrance, she's just bombed out of her mind, like, ooh. And she grabs my hand and starts trying to lead me off, and I'm like pulling away from her. I kind of scurried down the hall. I was like, scurried down to the hall, went into my room and locked the door. And I waited for about an hour because I had to go to the bathroom. So I waited for about an hour, opened the door, didn't see anybody around, so I thought it was safe. Went into the bathroom, and sure enough, one of the guys from upstairs was in the bathroom, pants down to his ankles, and she was performing her services, let's just say. Don't want to see that. Don't want to see that. Didn't want to see that. So, very uncomfortable, right? Like I said, there was drug addicts always, especially during the winter time, were always getting into the building, and they would barricade themselves in the bathroom. I don't know how many times I had to go to the bathroom and there'd be a drug addict passed out in the bathroom, and he didn't even live in the building. He was just off the street. He came in there to, I guess, get warm or whatever. And I don't know how many times the owner of the building would be calling the police, and they would be trying to get him out of there, and it was just an awful, awful mess. The straw that broke the camel's back in that situation was there was a drug addict that got in the building, and he was just tripping out on something. And he was going through all the way down the hall, just kicking in people's doors. And he kicked in like everybody's door from where the entrance was all the way back. Now my place was on the very end, and my place used to be an exit, but they had built onto the building. So my place was actually a huge brick wall with a reinforced door, because that used to be the door that led to the exit of the building. So mine was reinforced. I just remember him kicking on it like 6 or 7 times as hard as he could, but he couldn't bust down that door, which I was kind of lucky in that situation. But I guess the cops ended up getting called. People were mad because their doors were busted and they had no way to lock their rooms up anymore, and it was a mess. And I said, I'm getting out of here. I'm just done. I am through with this situation. You know what I mean? So I decided to go to another building that was actually a studio apartment. You know, studios for rent, but they were really cheap studios. A very similar vibe to that building, with the exception that they actually had, basically it's just a room with a little side kitchenette type of thing and a bathroom. But at least they had a bathroom, and at least it had a mini stove and a mini fridge, and it was not bad, okay? Not the nicest place in the world, let me just be clear, but and it was not in the greatest area of town, but it was at least your own private space. At least you didn't have to share bathrooms with people. At least you didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. But it was the same situation, the same element of people that I had to deal with. These cheap studio efficiency apartments were a couple of $100s more than what I was paying in the crack house. And yeah, they were a little bit better in the sense that you could kind of go and lock yourself away and didn't have to integrate with anybody. There were no common areas. You didn't have to worry about that aspect of it. The element of people were still the same. I don't know how many times within the course of the several years I lived at that place. I lived there for about 2 years, I would say. It was the same spiel. People doing drugs, you know. There was a girl that, you know, she every once in a while would get bombed out on something and run up the hallway just screaming and tripping out. One time she was completely buck naked, just screaming her head off, going on and on and on. I guess she ticked off her boyfriend at the time and he kicked her out butt naked. I don't know how many times I came home and walking through the hall and it'd be full of police. It would be full of paramedics sometimes. One time there were a bunch of paramedics resuscitating a guy, or trying to anyway. The neighbors were awful. See, this was an older building. The walls of your apartment were really strong, but the doors, they were not very soundproof at all. Anybody out in the hall that was talking, you could hear that person like he was in your, or she was in your apartment. So when that girl was running down the hall screaming, she sounded like she was in your apartment. The neighbor that was on the right-hand side of me, he had this chick that he kept always bringing over. And apparently he liked dealing with the lot lizards and street girls out on the streets of Denver, and he would bring them home. But he brought this one home that was particularly annoying. She would get drunk all the time and scream at this guy. And she had a really raspy voice like this. She would always be yelling at this guy, screaming at him at the top of her lungs. F you! F you! As loud as she could. I was on the phone with my mom one time. It's perfectly quiet. And then all of a sudden, F you! And of course, my mom was like, what was that? I was like, oh, it's a neighbor lady. My mom said, she sounds like she's in your apartment. I'm like, nope. The neighbor that was across the hall from me liked to leave his door open and blast music that I didn't like and I didn't want to listen to, and you couldn't get away from it. The only thing I did was try to put on headphones, but some days that didn't even work. And that was annoying. There was a girl that lived on the left-hand side of me. I heard every conversation she had on the telephone. Everything from what she did the other night to her sending her nudes to a bunch of random men, just all kinds of crap. I knew more about her than I really wanted to know, let's just say. The neighbors above me would fight all the dang time. You would hear them breaking glass, you would hear them fighting. It sounded like a herd of cattle above me all the time. It was like bop, 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 all the time. I tried to actually film. That was one of the first places I tried to film for my iBike Unfolded channel was in that apartment, and I couldn't ever do it because it was so loud, because those people would just stomp around upstairs like crazy. And they were always fighting, always arguing, and I just didn't want to hear it. Like I said, I don't like drama, and I don't want to listen to drama, and you had to listen to drama like you were in it, you know, and I didn't want to be in it. The straw that broke the camel's back there, though, was the neighbors above me would do drugs too, and that's partly why they fought all the time, I guess. And they would do drugs, and they left the water in the bathroom just going. And I guess it filled up the whole roof and started water falling in my bathroom below. I woke up and there was a huge puddle of water in my whole apartment. And of course, I walk into my bathroom and there's like a waterfall basically. And I'm just like, what in the holy... So I called the landlord. The landlord came. It took him forever to come out and look at it, and then they determined that it was those people, and he's like, I'm gonna kick those people out and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to remove myself because this is getting more than a little irritating. So needless to say, guys, that was my end of dealing with people and cheap apartments in bad neighborhoods or roommates or any of that kind of stuff. I had had it with it. I was done. Are there good roommates out there? Yes, I'm sure there are. Are there good places that are cheap out there? I'm sure they are. But generally the cheap places attract the worst kinds of people. Let's just put it that way. And I just don't want to deal with it anymore. I'd rather live in a tent, personally. I'll tell you the truth. I'd rather live in a tent than deal with that crap. 100%. So needless to say, guys, I didn't have a good time during that whole situation. After I moved out of that place, guys, I ended up renting a 1-bedroom apartment. Old building, but in a much better area of town. The building itself was crappy and the landlord never fixed anything, but at least it was peaceful. At least it was peaceful. But I'll tell you what, man, every month I spent paying that massive rent on that place, I wanted to cry. I mean, I was just like, I hate this. I hate spending this much money. Way more money than I ever wanted to spend in Denver. It also kept me from doing a lot of the things I wanted to do, which was kind of pointless to live in Denver at that point. Hope it's not a long train. So yeah, I moved back here. It's definitely a lot cheaper here, but it's the same situation, okay? Yeah, I'm sure one guy said that you can rent rooms to rent here for $600. I mean, I've seen them, but they're in the bad area of town, which means that there's a certain element of people that you're gonna live around. If you want something decent, you're gonna have to pay more for it. Sorry guys, I can't turn on the light right now. I'm trying to keep a low profile. Anyway guys, it's getting really late and there was like some trucks sitting back off the way over there and I didn't want to make my presence known. And since this tent lights up like a glowing orb, I'm not gonna turn on the light. I'm gonna try to keep my presence a little on the down low. Anyway guys, I'd rather live in this tent than go through what I went through the last couple of years before I got my own apartment in Denver. I can't take that crap anymore. I really can't. Anyway guys, it's really not that bad. I mean, once you get used to it, it is a pain in the ass, but once you get used to it, it's not really that bad. You can make it work. The amount of money that I can save doing this for a while, yeah, it makes it all worth it. It really does, except for when it rains. When it rains, I wanna, it's not fun at all. Anyway, guys, I am going to what the heck was that? That's why I got the light off. I'm trying to keep a low profile. I don't know, guys. I don't know what that was. I'm gonna get off here. If you guys have any comments or questions, leave it down in the comment and question section. Slap a like on the video if you like it, guys. And I am going to very discreetly go to bed and wake up tomorrow morning. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Bye.